I guess you could just put on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you all to the webinar. It looks like you're just joining us here. We look forward to getting started in just a moment. If you hear my voice, if you wouldn't mind just dropping into chat a quick hello. Yes, you can hear me. Where you're coming from today, anything that you're excited about today's conversation. And yeah, we'll get started in just a few moments here. I've got Nancy Schlesinger on the line all the way from the UK. So it is evening there. And so I'm grateful for you all making the time this afternoon so you can hear me and still be a reasonable time for Nancy as well. So, oh, great. It looks like we're...
That's kind of you to do it this time.
Well, it looks like we're starting to hear from people. Hi, Rebecca and Megan and Melody from Castle Rock, Colorado, Pamela, Wendy, Tracy, Joe, Brian, Diane, Cindy. Go Eagles. That was a nice surprise, I think. I just moved up here to New England, so I was in Patriots territory, but I think everybody else was excited for them. Hi, Jeff, Karen, David, Hammy. Great. Well, it looks like we've got a pretty good showing so far, so thank you, everybody, for jumping in and making it possible for us to share this conversation with you. And without any further ado, we're going to jump in and talk about how to become the diamond your boss can't live without needing to play office politics, kiss up, or be a phony. And we're going to teach you this by showing you how to deliver what your boss really cares about most and get the credit that you deserve for all that you do. So just a really quick introduction on myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alan Carnio. And for the past 9 years, I've been helping others to achieve their dream jobs. I'm the founder of Interview Success, Inc., and I've advised more than 31,040 plus professionals. And I apologize for the quick background noise. Nancy, you ready to jump in and share a bit about yourself?
Well, I founded Vinehouse Central. We do training and management consultancy, and I wrote How to Write Objectives at Work, which is a booklet on, well, how to write objectives, basically. And I have coached lots of people in how to be more effective managers and also in how to be more effective in their jobs.
Well, that's great. And you shared with me before all the amazing places that objectives booklet is now living and helping people. It's pretty neat. And so we're both here and excited to share with you a few things in this presentation, including how to deliver what your boss really cares about, how to get credit for your accomplishments without needing to brag, how to be a brilliant manager, even if you don't consider yourself great at managing, how to get rid of surprises and reviews and turn them into salary-raising conversations. We're also going to talk about how to be seen as invaluable in your job, how to make difficult conversations much easier, how to deal with those difficult people without creating drama, and a number of other things. And of course, we will be happy to answer your questions at the end. So as a bonus for attending today, I will share with you actually a video module that Nancy and I created on succeeding on your first day in the new job. And I'll share with you towards the end details on how you can get access to that. So just as a thank you, I'm glad you all could make the time to be here. We hope we can make it worthwhile for you. So a quick poll question for you. And if you don't mind taking a look on the right-hand side here near chat, you should see something that says polls. And what you should be able to see is a question that says, do you feel that your work gets fully appreciated? Is it most of the time, some of the time, not that often? So if you wouldn't mind jumping in there for a minute. And I just want to share with you why you all are answering that question, why this is important to you now. So an incredible statistic, Nancy does many, many hires and deals with the challenges on this side. Only 30% of hires are considered successful. 52% of people turn over in their jobs within the first 12 months. Managers give significantly more support to individuals who show proactive newcomer behavior. So that means if they get the right impression on you at the onset, they'll make a huge difference. If you aren't considered a diamond, your work life is less fulfilling than it could be. And if you aren't considered a diamond, you're leaving money on the table with every paycheck. So let's take a quick look at the poll results. And I'm seeing that 10% of you get fully appreciating your work most of the time, 61% some of the time, and 29% not that often. So, well, for the 10%, I think, you're in great organizations and you're taking the right steps. And for the rest, hopefully we can help you be acknowledged more frequently and more significantly more often. So you're in the right place today if you want to build a reputation as the go-to resource that everyone counts on. If you're in a new job and you want to establish a reputation, or even if you're relatively new and still need to establish that reputation, if you consistently deliver results, but you don't get the credit or compensation that you deserve for those results, and if you're struggling, other people are doing better, you're working hard, and you just don't know where that gap is between why they're getting that extra acknowledgement and why you're not, or why there's that stuckness. If any of these apply to you, then you're in the right place. And so I just want to welcome you for being here today. And here are just a few of the comments that I saw you all make in reasons that you're here. And hopefully we're going to answer a lot of these questions. A couple of them that jumped out at me were the schedule to have a conversation regarding compensation this week, that previous conversations haven't gone well, and that they want to approach it effectively and professionally, and that you want to better understand how to promote your contributions and get the pay, recognition, and promotion you desire. So we're going to hopefully cover a lot of these topics today, and anything that we don't answer during the presentation, please ask us at the end. We're here to help. So just some quick house rules, and then we'll really start to dive in. Is we want you to shut out distractions. We're going to go fast. I tend to talk quickly. Your time is valuable, and so we're going to try to pack in as much material as we can. Do feel free to take notes, write down questions. You can post them in chat. We will address them at the end. And please share with us. Let us know if there's something that's interesting, if there's something that didn't work, if there's something that you want to learn more about. Please share with us. Just drop a note in chat. It's really helpful. We rely on your input. Every single job is different. So we're going to focus on some methods and techniques that's worked many times. Remember that nothing works 100%. Depending on where you are in the cycle of your job, there's going to be more effective or less effective techniques. And obviously the people that you're working with, certain things are going to work better than others. So just to acknowledge that. So we're giving this webinar for a few different reasons, but basically we've seen good people and good companies not work out, and not work out for bad reasons. There's obviously bad fits, but when there's other things that could be extremely frustrating. We want you to thrive on the job and for your work to become a dream job for you. And the more that you're in a position of control, the more that you can shape the job to be that dream job. And taking the right actions at the right times can make your work life much better, whereas sometimes waiting too long can get you in a lot of trouble. We'll touch a little bit on that later on. So that's some of the reasons we're giving this webinar. And we've been in frustrating places where our efforts themselves weren't acknowledged. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy to share her story in particular that really is kind of startling about what she experienced.
Well, I mean, this is a long time ago, like the early 14th century, but I was hired as a graduate trainee and then moved on to a production manager in a manufacturing facility. And I was the only woman to be hired into that job at that stage. And my boss basically said, you've got to be successful, because if you aren't, we're just not going to get another woman into this position for a very long time. Now, I got the biggest department and a really complicated production area and one or two very challenging people working for me. And I was producing the highest quality in the company of all the production lines, the best efficiency, and I had the lowest turnover. But I was actually paid in those days what was £5,000 a year less than the men doing the same job as me. I mean, these days it would be equivalent to £20,000 or something along those lines. And the men got away with all kinds of things that I didn't get away with. I mean, in some ways that was good because I learned a lot. But in other ways, it was really frustrating because, I was doing a good job, being paid a lot less, and they just got away with not doing a very good job. And I mean, I got people to perform better, or I fired them. I got a reputation for being able to sort out people. And I remember one particular occasion when, my boss used to tell me off for what he called this feminist stuff. And he showed a training video to myself and my colleagues, who are all men. And during the video, it was Fred Hertzberg who talks about different motivation factors and things. And he was, I think, from the early 60s, this video. And in it, it actually said women prefer to say they've been raped rather than seduced. And he was using that as an example in motivation somehow. And my boss asked us all what we thought of the video. And I said I didn't really need to say what I thought, because I thought it was really obvious how offensive it was. And I kept sort of refusing to say anything. And in the end, my boss sort of insisted I told him what I thought. So I said that I found that phrase really offensive. And I then got told off for being all this feminist stuff. You stay behind, I need to talk to you. And then, I mean, he didn't fire me or anything, but I got called into my boss's office and asked about what I'd produced the previous week. And I told him, and I had the kind of sheet from the production manager kind of next along in the line, what he'd asked for, all in his own handwriting. And it turned out that this guy had actually given my boss completely different figures to the ones that I'd actually produced. Fortunately, I'd got what he'd asked me for in his own handwriting. So I kind of gave this to my boss, who got really, really upset about it and stormed off and went to see the guy. Well, afterwards, when I spoke to my boss, because I didn't realize how serious this was, you know, I said, well, weren't you a little bit hard on this guy, Steve? And he said, did I realize that this had cost the company £250,000? Now, remember, that was a long time ago, so that was a huge amount of money. And he then said that if I'd done that, I would have been fired. But they didn't fire that guy somehow. But, you know, there you go. I was just really fortunate that I had got the facts there to back me up, and I got the evidence. So after that, I was really, really careful to always keep records. And I started researching tools and strategies to be more effective in those areas, things that I tested and got my team to do and so on. And I also used to spend a lot of time whenever I saw someone who was really good at something in that area, you know, in sort of getting a pay rise or negotiating something effectively or dealing with really unfair treatment, then I'd look at how they did it and how it worked, and I'd sort of write it down and work out what the strategy was. And those are the sorts of things that I've been training people on for years now. I mean, after that, I moved on to another company, to a much more senior role, and I then sort of started training other people as managers, and I started working as a consultant, training people and things and giving advice and stuff. And I've worked for all sorts of different companies. I mean, some of them are listed here. There's all sorts of other things I've done. And I've also written a lot of little booklets on how to do stuff in a way that I hope is really easy and straightforward. I think that's one of the key things. I try to make things really, really simple and practical, so that people don't have to put up with the kinds of things I had to put up with or end up in some of the situations that I ended up with. So that's what I do. Have I missed anything out, Alan? Anything crucial?
I think you're great.
Good.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you're here and you made the time. I met Nancy a couple of years ago at basically talking about my business and my clients, and she shared what she did. And I just feel really fortunate that I've had the chance to work with her and learn from her and be able to introduce her to all of you with everything that she knows. And this is just, you know, it's my pleasure. And some of what I'm going to share with you is just what she's going to share as well, are just some of the really things that popped out during our conversations together. So what we're calling them is 5 pillars to become a workplace diamond. And they are to identify objectives, like Nancy's booklet suggested, checking in, being acknowledged, overcoming obstacles, and being and staying ahead of the curve. So the first topic that we're going to jump into today is identifying objectives. And I'm going to start with a really simple question, which actually is a very expensive question for companies, which is, why do projects fail? And so Clear Company did some research on this. And then what they found is pretty surprising. 97% of professionals cite lack of alignment within a team directly impacts the outcome of a task or project. So people aren't on the same page about what's going on. 86% of professionals cite lack of collaboration or ineffective communication for workplace failures, right? So people just aren't sharing information as they needed. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. And only 14% of companies have employees who understand the organization's strategy, goals, and direction, right? So that means 85% of companies basically feel like their employees just don't know what the heck is going on. And lack of goal clarity also means that you feel disengaged in your work because you don't know the purpose of the work that you're doing or even how you're doing. You work on projects that ultimately get thrown out or have to be redone because the work wasn't actually needed. And you can't really think ahead to fix problems or develop shortcuts or better approaches because you just don't know what that next step looks like. And so a quick story that Nancy shared with me, I think will be really useful, is about John.
Well, this is a guy who was on a course I was running about objectives, and people come along and they write the objectives and we sort of get them straight. And he had this objective or this goal that was to produce reports on these 22 different options for improving profitability in the company that he worked for. And it was just taking him forever because he was a really thorough sort of guy. And when I talked to him about what he really needed to achieve, it wasn't actually to write 22 reports at all. What it was to identify what the most profitable of those 22 options were and to then present those to the board. So in fact, what he really had to do was do a small piece of research into each one of those to find out which were the best ones, and then write a report on the 3 to 5 that were the most promising, which was less than a third of the work that he was planning to do.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you were able to catch it.
Yeah.
So basically, an issue like John had can be fixed with objectives. So we're going to talk about, you've probably heard about goals. Objectives are a little bit different. And they're basically the goals of a person or a team for a project or specific time period. And they include specific numbers or criteria by which performance gets measured. And in addition, objectives are going to tell you and your manager whether or not you're doing a good job and help the managers to articulate goals and put everyone on the same page. So as opposed to goals, which can kind of be a little bit pie in the sky, objectives need to have those clearly defined metrics, or basically know where the finish line is to work. So who should have objectives? Well, you should have objectives. Obviously, if you don't know what you're aiming for, then you don't really know how you're doing. And in addition, your boss can also know how you're doing when there are objectives. Your boss should have objectives. You can't help them succeed if you don't know what their target is. And your team, if you're a manager and you want everybody to be on the same page, you want that alignment. Basically, you can guide them to perform their best. We'll talk more about teams a little bit later. But definitely objectives for your team can make a huge difference. All right. So the next piece beyond objectives that we want to talk about is checking in, which works very well in combination with objectives. Is actually a little bit harder without it, but it's still a very valuable tactic. So every manager, probably something that you've experienced, definitely something Nancy and I have experienced, is that face these 3 big problems. And the first is that what's in their head and what they tell you are not the same thing, right? So they have a vision in your head, but the words that come out don't necessarily articulate that clearly, or they don't communicate all the ideas because they make assumptions about what's in their head and what they know. Some of them don't really know what you're doing unless you tell them. And so they make bad assumptions about how you're spending your time and what you're working on. And team members, as a result, sometimes of the results above, and sometimes for other reasons, don't consistently perform at their best, right? So they basically have these 3 challenges because of communication difficulties, basically is the biggest gap. And so an example of this actually is somebody Nancy knows pretty well named Charlie. So Nancy, can you
also know Alan?
I do. Charlie's a lovely, lovely person. Yeah, she's great.
So Charlie works for me, and she's like my PA, business manager. She kind of does all the admin and stuff for me. And of course, I used to do all that myself years ago when I first started my company, my consultancy. And Charlie's been doing it for, I guess, it must be about 18, actually nearly 20, about 20 years, must be something like 20 years. And one of the things that happens when she goes on holiday is I have to do some of that stuff. And the problem is I always forget what it's like doing that because it's so many years since I did it. So I have these kind of rose-tinted spectacles thinking, well, if someone places an order for a book or a booklet or something, oh, it's like 5 minutes, just wrap it up, pop it down to the post office, whatever. It is not a 5-minute job. And of course, the other thing is, I'm really not as good at doing it as Charlie is either. And she's really organized. She's got it all done. Whereas I don't know how much the postage is. I haven't got the packaging there. I'm really useless at printing out the labels. I had to print some out just this weekend. And it took me, this is really embarrassing, 3 goes to print the label out. Because the first time I printed it out on the wrong side of the paper. The second time I printed it out on a blank space where the label wasn't stuck on the thing. And the third time I finally actually got it in the right place. I mean, so it's very easy as a boss to think what is involved in the job of one of your team members, but actually be completely wrong. So you really need to make sure that they do understand. That's why Charlie actually goes on holidays, just so that I know how difficult her job is, I think. Don't you think that, Alan? It's probably why she does it, isn't it? She doesn't really want a holiday at all. She just wants me to know how hard she works.
Nobody ever wants a vacation. It's just a
that's right.
salary negotiation tactic. Yeah. Absolutely.
But all joking aside, it's very, very easy for managers to not have a good understanding of what's actually involved in your job.
Mm-hmm. And considering, Nancy, I'd say you're pretty enlightened about management practices. If there are things that you don't notice, even the best managers don't notice them.
Well, I mean, Charlie says I'm the best person she's ever worked for. I shudder to think what the others were like, Alan. It must have been awful.
So communication fixes these problems mostly, right? So the way to find out what your manager's priorities are, what their objectives are, in particular to find out what their priorities are this week, right? Because priorities do change, is to ask. And the way to make sure you deliver the most desired results, you're focusing on what has to get done first, the work that's required, is to ask. The way to get the credit you deserve is to update them with your accomplishments, right? So you ask to get information, and then you update with, here's what the results were of your work, which is actually very helpful for your boss to know what you've accomplished on a timely basis. And the best way to get projects you want is to talk regularly with your boss, because your boss may not even realize that project B was the one that you were mostly excited about, not project A. Whereas John, who got project B, didn't even like doing project B, right? So communication fixes most of these problems. The thing is that's amazing. This is another set of statistics that I think is pretty amazing from Talent Keepers, which is how often do you have planned meetings to discuss basically engagement? So basically this is just asking, here's what you have to do and how are you doing? Those kinds of questions. And what you see here is that something like 50% of companies do this once per year or longer, or never, just during the onboarding process, right? And even the best firms, only about a third of them do it weekly or monthly. The rest of them do it just once a quarter. So it can be extremely, extremely frustrating to get not too much information about how you're doing.
Do you know how often Charlie and I do it, Alan?
How often?
Every day.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm sure I get it. I was going to say, I'm sure it helps you keep track of what are the priorities for the day and everything else.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you should all be doing it every day, but I think once a week is probably a minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do every Monday morning, actually, when I am, which is great, but not nearly as good as the once a day. But sometimes you need more and sometimes you need less. But once a week, I think it was really good just to keep track of things, because they change pretty regularly. So all of this really can help you avoid another problem, right? So if you're down here, you're going to be experiencing what we call the annual review surprise. And what that means is you walk into a review and you discover that there was a problem that could have been fixed a long time ago if they just talked to you about it. And so the review switches from identifying new goals and discussing a raise, all the positive forward future things, to defending actions and trying to recall something that happened months and months ago, right? Which isn't really what should be there in terms of your review. But that's what can happen when there isn't good communication, and bosses feel like, oh, I can share that Alan isn't asking enough questions 4 months later, and that he wasted 3 weeks on this project several months later. It doesn't help anybody. So the check-in is really the way to replace it. The check-in isn't anything that sophisticated. It's an informal meeting between you and your boss. You update your boss on your project, being specific. Even with the results document, right? If you've done a lot since the last meeting, it's sometimes helpful to show it on a piece of paper, especially if there are things that you want to make sure you cover and you're worried about forgetting anything. You ask questions about results, what their goals are, how you're doing. You get advice and you get feedback on how you're doing. And you have these meetings regularly, weekly, every 2 weeks. And they let your manager sleep easy because they know what you're doing. They feel confident that you're doing a good job. It lets you share your current stage of progress on projects. And it makes it easy for managers to correct any miscommunication. So if you spend a week on doing the wrong thing, that's obviously a week loss. But if you spend a month doing the wrong thing, that can be pretty brutal. And
I'm just going to chip in here slightly,
sure.
Alan, and I just to give you an idea of, I think, how easy it is for this to go wrong. If you imagine you're at the airport, and you've probably been at the airport when there's been a delay, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody tells you anything. Yeah. In fact, you're looking on the board. It's saying that you're going to board, you go to the check-in. It says, go to check-in in like 5 minutes or something. And then it's 5 minutes again. And 10 minutes later, it's still 5 minutes. And you think something's not right. Yeah. Mm. And you go to the desk, nobody knows anything. And the thing is, they knew that it was going to be late because the plane obviously was late. So they knew when that plane didn't leave on time that it was going to be late arriving, didn't they? Mm. If that airline company just, put something out and said, right, this flight is going to be delayed by half an hour because it's left late, how would you feel?
Well, at least then I know I can go to a restaurant in the airport and order a hot meal.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry. And it's exactly the same with your manager. If you just let your manager know what's going on and say, yeah, that report that you asked for next Friday, there's been this problem. I can't get this information till Thursday, which means I won't be able to finish that till Monday morning. Yeah, they might be a little bit annoyed, but it's nothing compared to what they'll be if you just don't hand it in or let them know at the very last moment. So that's just, I think, how I think about it when you're dealing with a manager on issues and things.
Yeah, I've found this is particularly helpful when you're waiting. Let's say team member Joe is supposed to contribute a data set or something, and you're waiting on team member Joe and you've bothered team member Joe, and team member Joe is going to get it to you. And you can at least kind of update your boss that says, here's what I'm working on. Team member Joe is working on this other project, but I'm waiting on his data. So as soon as he can get it over, we'll be ready to go. And at least then they understand why there's a holdup. They know what team member Joe is working on that's holding him up. Makes a huge difference. So setting up check-ins isn't that complicated. That's the other thing, right? So to schedule a check-in, just ask your boss for 15 minutes on their calendar. Suggest follow-up meetings in your initial conversation. Just say, hey, Nancy, listen, I really enjoyed touching base with you. Would you mind if we really connect next week around the same time just to kind of update you on what I'm working on? It can be that informal. And you can decrease the frequency a little bit later on, but just make sure that you're doing this regularly.
Yeah, once your boss has got confidence that you know what you're doing and they can sort of sit back and trust you, then I think it's fine to decrease the frequency. But initially, I would make it reasonably frequent.
So I know we've spent a lot of time on check-ins, but I think this is one of the most powerful tools out there that help you clarify basically the other 5 pillars that the other 4 pillars that we're talking about, understanding objectives and the goals and where you're trying to go and the results you're trying to deliver. And it's critically important for this next topic, which is being acknowledged. So let's talk about who gets the perks and the credit for work. This is one of my favorite and shocking stories.
This is hilarious. This is totally true. And I'm not going to mention the name of the company for reasons that will become obvious. But it was a site of a large pharma company. And they went through rounds and rounds of redundancies. And they started firing all sorts of people at all different levels and stuff. And then one day, the whole computer system went down. No one could get anything done at all. And unfortunately, it turned out the only person who knew how to reboot it had been fired a year before. And it took them 3 days to track the guy down. And for those 3 days, no one could get anything done. And you think, it's hard to have sympathy with them, isn't it?
Absolutely.
When they've done that and really haven't been careful about thinking, well, who is responsible for what and who and stuff. I mean, the good example I'm going to give, which I'm just going to squeeze in here, is a woman called Jean who used to work for me, Jean Salver. Absolutely amazing. I'm hardly ever off sick, but I was off sick one day at very short notice, came in the next day, And she just came up and she said, now there were 3 things I thought you'd want me to do yesterday while you were off. Told me what they were. And amazing. She just read my mind. She'd done them, let me know they were done. Absolutely fantastic. No song or dance, no sort of big trumpets or fanfare or anything, just quietly did these 3 things. Hope that's okay.
It doesn't even sound like she was bragging or anything else either.
Not at all. It was just like, I'm just letting you know so you don't have to worry about them not being done or do them yourself. There you go. They're just done.
I mean, one of the things that's the flip side of that pharmaceutical story is that the gentleman who they fired, right, he was critical to their operations. But he didn't you kind of like it. I'm sure he was really happy that day. I mean, sort of could point the finger at them for letting him off. And at the same time, there were points where he could acknowledge some of the unique abilities that he had to support the organization and how critical he was, because had they known he was the guy, I mean, it cost them far more in those 3 days than it did his salary. So people who get retained during layoffs and earn the perks during good times are good at making sure people know what they did. So rather than the people who quietly do their job without letting anybody know. And that's kind of what's happened there. And so one of the big things that we just want to start with is first to accept credit. And I know being modest and being part of a team and not trying to be a show off has been something that many of us have been taught in school, right? The tall grass gets mowed down and all that. But at least when you're being recognized for your accomplishments, accept credit for what you do, because when people know what you've done, you increase your perceived value and your chances of getting a raise or promotion. And if you don't take the credit, somebody else will take the credit. Likely someone
either that, or your boss will just assume someone else has done it, or just not even think who's done it. So that's what will happen.
And so just remember that you're only acknowledging results that you've created, right? Obviously, you don't want to be taking credit for other people's work, but definitely you want to be acknowledging the specific results that you've created. So if you've ever been afraid to take credit for what you do, don't be afraid to say, thank you, I really appreciate the recognition. It can make a huge, huge difference just kind of saying thank you and acknowledging something. And if you want to give credit to a particular part of the work to somebody else, it's okay to say, thank you, I really appreciate the recognition. Nancy was actually super helpful in giving this presentation because she had incredible stories to share and, has been such a mentor to me in terms of this content. But I worked really hard on this as well, so I really appreciate that, right? So accept the credit that you're due. So how do you take fair credit without bragging? First is to know the objectives, what you're trying to achieve. And that can take some communication with your boss to get that established. But then you can create plans based on those objectives. Okay, so if I'm trying to achieve X, here's the steps that I'm trying to take to reach that objective. So then you can share this information to help your team and your boss, right? And then you can update your manager regularly on your work towards achieving specific goals via check-ins, emails, end-of-day drop-ins. It was Jean or Jane, Nancy? Jean, like Jean did, just kind of updating Nancy on the work that she did. And so if you and your boss are on the same page about the objectives and you're just kind of updating them, it's again, just that value-adding communication that keeps them out of the dark in terms of what you're doing and helps them understand all the work and effort that you put in on a daily basis. So definitely I encourage you to document successes when they happen. Don't just wait until the annual review to try to remember in December what you did the previous January, right? And they're valuable for those check-in conversations. They're valuable for reviews. They're valuable for your resume if you decide that you do want to move on at any point. So make sure to keep the numbers and specific details. Don't just say good at, but actually document here's the objective and here's the results of what we achieved. And definitely make others feel part of your successes along the way. Celebrate when you do have successes, when your team has successes, celebrate, whether it's buying them lunch or taking them out to drinks or just having a meeting and just saying thank you for a minute or sending out a thank you email. Do celebrate and do acknowledge others and express gratitude for victories. And the more that they see you basically supporting them and acknowledging them, the more they will likewise see that that is culturally what they should be doing and should be acknowledging you back. So that can only be a good thing as well. Anything else on this one, Nancy?
No, I think that's really all the key things there.
Okay, great. So with that, we're going to jump into overcoming obstacles. And there are a number of different kinds of obstacles that you might face, right? There may be coworkers that are trying to manipulate you into doing certain behaviors, bullies that are trying to, I guess manipulators are more like basically being deceptive in their characteristics, and bullies are more pushing you around to get their way, making you stay later, or those kinds of things. There are going to be times where basically your own life is going to get in the way, whether it's sleep or making sure you get exercise or whatever it might be. Just remember that Stitch in Time does save 9. Obstacles are going to come up. And if you do notice an issue, try to solve it as quickly as possible. Don't just kind of let this behavior go. Or let these challenges go. Try to acknowledge them as quickly as possible, because the longer you let a problem go, the more difficult that it's going to be to fix. And delays lead to formations of bad habits for yourself or for other people. If you deal with someone who's being a bully or a manipulator, they might keep pushing and testing limits and see how much they get away with. And of course, by the time they've kind of twisted until you basically are at the point of screaming and yelling, it's very, very hard to kind of repair things and get things back on track. And trying to recover any lost ground. So I know we've got a great story to share about a headmistress. Anything else you wanted to share before we jump in on that?
Yes, I was working with a group of principals, school principals of what we call public schools in this country, but they're actually the private ones that you pay to go to. And this was the principal of a school that is one of the best, most famous schools in the country. And it turned out she was being bullied really badly by the school board, by the chair of the school board. And she just let that situation get worse and worse. It was just a terrible situation. But really, what she hadn't done was deal with it, as you've just said, Alan, at an early stage. I mean, obviously we helped her to resolve it. But if she'd dealt with that early on, it wouldn't have been anything like what it was when I encountered it. And that can happen to anyone, even a person, in a senior position like that.
And you even share with me that she's somebody that if you met her, she looked like a strong, confident.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, you would never know. Yeah, I was really astonished, actually, when I heard what had happened. But yeah, she could have avoided that, definitely.
So the last thing that we want to talk about is being ahead of the curve. And that means basically just not waiting for things to kind of come down the pike and get stuff handed to you when it gets handed to you, but to be forward thinking and jumping ahead of things. So the first thing that you want to do is create value without being asked. And one way to do that is put yourself in the shoes of your manager and ask them, what do they really need, right? So like Jean mentioned with Nancy, how can you save the manager time or money? How else can you make work easier for them and help them generate results? Things that they are frustrated about, but things that you can do to make life better for your boss, for your team, for your project, those kinds of things without being asked for it. Always be thinking ahead, looking at industry trends, talking to other people in the space who can give you their experience and advice. They can be very small things, just as it's years and years since Nancy's worked with Jean, and that one day stood out to her. Which is amazing, right? But they can be very small things. They can be big things as well that make a big difference, but definitely create value without being asked. So to do that, you have to make sure you understand your boss's objectives and what's important to them. The only way to do that is to ask, check in regularly to stay up on their goals. They do change with time. Identify their obstacles. You can talk to them about this, or you can think about it on your own and help them solve it. Right? Even if you just fix one very small piece of an obstacle, that can be one step ahead, like in chess, that can make a huge difference in sort of getting across the board. And then share what you've accomplished to reassure them and reduce their stress, right? So everybody knows, everybody feels better knowing that they have somebody who's got their back. And so if you do things that make them feel like, oh my gosh, I can totally trust Nancy to make my life better. I can sleep easier at night knowing that if there's a problem, Nancy is there. If I'm delayed for some reason, if I'm sick, Nancy can be somebody to help me out. That's incredibly powerful. So, and just being there to help solve these problems and be one step ahead can create that reassurance, which is hugely important. So, why does all this matter? Well, these 5 pillars are what can help you get recognized for your value and to be rewarded appropriately for it, to help you get promotions, to help you get pay raises and all the rest. And it helps you navigate tricky work situations with ease and have a less stressful, far more fulfilling work experience. So it's incredibly valuable just to spend these times doing these things, even though they seem like small things and they seem like things that you can just put off. That obviously today's crisis, helps prevent you from doing them. They do make a huge difference to squeeze in here and there, even if it's just a couple minutes for that extra value add. And if you do want more support for these kinds of results, for getting ahead, for getting that increased perceived value, then I want to share with you some of what Nancy and I have been working on. It's actually a program called Make Yourself Indispensable. It's a 2018 coaching program here to help you throughout the year, specifically designed to help you build your track record of standout successes, be a top performer, even with managers who don't communicate well, overcome difficult people, lead and manage even if you aren't a natural, get recognized and rewarded without bragging. And so if you want to be somebody who builds that diamond asset reputation, manages those tricky situations with confidence, and also have an expert in your corner, whatever comes your way, and achieve your 2018 career goals, then this program is here for you. And basically just to share with you a little bit more about the program, and then we can take your questions. Part one is coaching. And so it's not just open-ended coaching, but it is, again, goals-based towards your objectives and where you're trying to go. So we are going to basically meet the first time to work together to define your 2018 goals, figure out whether it's getting that raise or promotion, whether it's just getting settled and acknowledged into a new job, whether it's dealing with a difficult team of coworkers who basically aren't giving you the support that you need to be successful. Whatever it is, we will work together to kind of articulate that. And then each month, we're going to talk about whatever your biggest challenge is and how it fits with that 2018 goal and help you kind of resolve that knot so you can keep moving forward. And we're going to support you on these goals all the way through the end of 2018, including taking on that annual review. So hopefully you'll be checking in all the way. And when you hit that annual review, if you want to be asking for a raise because you've done so much good work this year in 2018, if you feel like you're ready for promotion, we can actually start that conversation even sooner, but you could at least establish that conversation. We can help you with that. Whatever it is, we'll support you all the way through until the end of the year. And so the coaching format is actually monthly calls designed to solve your challenges and learn from the experiences of other people as well, because whatever you're facing, other people can learn from, and what other people are facing can be huge learning experiences for you as well. And so we basically do mostly group calls on a monthly basis, interspersed with once per quarter kind of one-on-one short lightning calls. So basically you'll schedule a time with Nancy and I to chat with you. And if there's anything really sensitive that you're most concerned about sharing in front of a group, or even if you just want to continue the conversation on that month on the topics that you started before, we've kind of scheduled these in as additional time, as an additional way to connect with us, basically. So it'd be like a group call, and then these one-on-one calls. So whether you're facing down a bully, establishing yourself a new job, or escaping that feeling of stuckness and wanting the recognition you deserve, basically our job is going to be here to help you sort that out and make yourself become indispensable. So part two is called Job Success Formula. And basically what this is anytime access to the exact methods that Nancy has used herself and taught to top performers at firms like Rolls-Royce, CAT Construction, Deutsche Bank, Learning Tree, AstraZeneca, and the other firms that you saw listed there, and many others. So the first module is about taking on the new job. It's about how to get up the learning curve fast. But if you've been in a job for a while and you don't yet feel established in that job, you're still trying to sort out how everything works, this module and these tools and these methods can help you. The second component is about connections at work. So creating that strong relationship with your boss, check-ins, objectives, lots of other techniques, but basically helping you understand how they can fully trust you and see you as a go-to resource. It's also about how do you build strong allies and support from your peers and team members. And then we're going to get into module 3, which is leading and managing, which is learning how to target results that matter for your team, getting basically the target where you want to, bringing your team together, even in difficult situations. Sometimes you may be jumping in and there was a boss that everybody loved and you have to jump in, or there was no boss for 6 months, or the last guy or gal was completely incompetent and they don't trust any boss at this stage. This is kind of here to help you through that process and also give your team the clarity to perform at their best. And then module 4 is about building a career that you want. Strengths-based career that puts you basically in flow, that makes you completely immersed, engaged in your work, makes your days flow by fast, and makes you feel rewarded for what you do. And also to line yourself up from that promotion or get that pay raise, and to avoid getting stuck with that throwaway work, right? Just doing projects that don't really matter, but focusing on results that are most important. And finally, the last thing that we're going to do in this program, the last module that's available to you, and you can basically crack this course open anytime you want and approach the methods that you're dealing with. So you don't have to wait weeks and weeks if you're dealing with a bad boss or tough coworkers. But we talk about methods to disarm bullies and basically make everybody alert to the behaviors of manipulators without basically demeaning yourself or stooping to their level or creating kind of a fisticuffs or any sort of conflict. And basically it's here to help you get the job on track when you're no longer doing what you were hired to do. So basically you're getting the exact proven methods and personal advice to become indispensable and reach your 2018 goals. This is going to be a year-long program, essentially a little bit less as we're already in February, but basically it's going to be here to help you between now and the end of 2018. And if you wanted to sit down with Nancy and I, that would cost you about $490 per hour. The management training materials are going to cost you, I don't even know how much we estimated based on the cost of some items, about $730, but chances are it'd be a decent amount more. And so the opportunity to work with us for the year would probably cost you over $5,000. But we're pretty excited about this. We love doing this kind of work. And so we're actually giving you full access to us through this program for just $77 a month. If this is something that's interesting to you, basically, what you're going to see here on the right is a button that says Get Access and make yourself indispensable in 2018. It's on the right-hand side there where you saw the polls in the chat, and you can just jump in. And so basically, you can get the start button, enter your payment information, and you get immediate access to Job Success from the site where you can start to dive in, and then join the coaching calls to set your skills and work with us through any obstacles that are getting in your way for the year. So if you do want to be valued as a diamond asset and deal with those tricky situations with ease, or be effective even when you're dealing with subpar managers, which as I'm sure many of us have experienced, is more common than you'd think or expect, and get the recognition you deserve without needing to sell out and brag and put yourself in that uncomfortable position of trying to stand out on a pedestal. Then basically just click to get started and get access to this program. There are a few things that we've done to make this better for you. First, we've got a 90-day guarantee. So we invite you to read the materials, join the calls, and if you don't feel like you're getting results in the first 90 days of the program, then you can just say, this isn't for me. Even if you just decide it's not for you, basically you're switching to a new job and you've gotten the greatest boss of all time and everything else. But if something happens and you decide it's not right for you, any reason, just let us know. We'll give you a full refund during that first 90-day period, no questions or wiggle clause or anything else. And we threw in a couple of sweeteners for you. So we mentioned Nancy's award-winning booklets, which I'm blanking. What's the name of the Prime Minister's office in England?
Yes, 10 Downing Street. 10
Downing Street. So these actually are sitting, I think some of these are sitting in 10 Downing Street.
The How to Write Objectives one is there, and it's also in Buckingham Palace as well. 50 copies are at Buckingham Palace and 50 copies in 10 Downing Street. So whether you may think you're not in good company after I've said that.
We still like the royals over here and everything else. So you do get access to 6 bonus guides. They're online pocket guides packed with proven tips, and you can access them anytime to tackle frequent job challenges. Most of them are going to be digital, although we do have a few hard copies that I may try to circulate out to folks who sign up today. So you can access those guides and a couple other things I think that are pretty useful based on previous times that we've done this program, which is get unstuck support. So we might walk you through a certain strategy, right? How to write a certain email or something else. And you've listened, you were there, you took notes on the call, you listened to the recording later on, and you basically wrote out this email, but you're feeling like something's not right here. You can email us with where you're stuck and we'll get back to you, basically. So if you have trouble executing on something that we talked about during the call, we're here to help you get unstuck with that piece of it. And the last one is basically one extra emergency one-on-one support call. So if you find yourself in a tricky situation, basically, you found you're in a heated argument with your boss and you're trying to sort it out this week and rescue your job, or you've got to negotiate for a raise or anything else that happens, but you hit that tricky situation, you can break your glass on what we're calling an emergency lightning coaching call. This is just a short call to help you through whatever that emergency is. You can just use that once over the course of 2018 to help you overcome whatever that roadblock is. I mean, obviously we have our monthly calls, but this could be between calls, you need help and your back is against the ropes. This is here for you as well. So that's everything that we're including in the program. Personal coaching every month, Nancy's best methods inside a job success formula site, and bonus pocket guides, the Unstuck support, and the emergency call. So you can click Get Started to join. And by ordering today, you get all this at a huge discount. It's just $77 a month for the course of 2018. And then it's backed up by the guarantee. So if it doesn't work for you, just get your money back. We are winding this up on Sunday. We just want to get started and help everybody who is interested in the program to achieve their 2018 goals. So we're not going to wait too long to get people through the door. So if you've watched the presentation, you know this is pretty good in terms of what's offered, and I just want to encourage you to take advantage of the amazing resources and the guarantee and everything else, and to hit the actually get access button on the right there, the orange button, to join the program if it is something interesting to you. And with that, we are opening up to all the questions that you have. So if there's anything about the 5 pillars that we talked about, getting the credit you deserve, or being acknowledged, checking in, basically how to objectives, what are objectives, how to set objectives, overcoming those obstacles, nipping difficult behavior in the butt, excuse me. And basically just staying ahead of the curve. Feel free to ask us in chat. We're happy to help. If you have questions about this coaching program and how it works, please let us know. We are happy to answer those questions as well. But we are very, very excited to make this time, for you to take this time with us and everything else.
There's a comment here, Alan, from Brian. Says, you both sound very reasonable, but a number of my former bosses have been completely uncommunicative and insanely unreasonable with their time for bad news. And yeah, I've had people like that, actually. And there are things you can do on that, Brian. I mean, we'd need details of, what the actual situation was, but there are things you can do. I mean, obviously one of them is leave, but that may not always be what you want to do. But there are ways of getting through to most people.
I mean, I think there are certain times where, like, let's say a bad relationship, right? You could be 2 perfectly good people, but there's so much bad blood. The only thing you can do is leave. But then there are a number of things where if you're not at that stage, you can get things right on track. I mean, if you have to deliver bad news, one strategy that you can always use is here's what's happening and here's what I've started to do to resolve that situation. And you can potentially kind of break it into pieces to sort of stage it out. But definitely showing that bad news basically isn't a complete and total bomb that's stopping everything in their tracks. But showing how there's already solution in motion can make a huge difference. So anything else on that?
I'm just having a look, see if there's any other. There's a point here about confirmation bias. Oh, someone's asking, if I sign up, how long do I pay $77 a month?
So Heidi, the program takes you through the end of 2018. So basically between now and December. And then we work together every single month, and basically we support, with that support is the payment. And then when the year wraps up, hopefully with an exceptional annual review and exceptional results for the year, we say goodbye to each other and move on. So I hope that helps, but let's see. Confirmation bias grows and grows.
Yes. I was actually looking at something about this today, that it can sort of start even at the interview stage, and by asking people how much they're already earning before they even join. Yes, it does. But there are things you can do. And a lot of them are to do with actually making sure you've got your objectives clear and asking your boss how they'd know you were doing a good job. That's one of my favorite questions. How would you know I was doing a good job on this? And sometimes the way they know that you're doing a good job is really different from what you were thinking.
That's really interesting. Wolfgang says, tell me about managers that can't communicate.
How long have you got? There are lots of managers who can't communicate. And I think one of the key things is that as someone working for a manager, the skill you need to develop is to work out how to communicate with them, and what kind of communication style they've got. I mean, maybe they're just really shy. It may be that they're just really childish. Who knows? It's going to be different depending on the boss. But I know, I've worked for some bosses. I mean, one who was really nice but unbelievably useless. Useless with paperwork, never knew what he was doing and stuff. And I used to have to kind of work it all out for him and then sort of tell him. But in the end, it kind of worked out okay. I left, but then I got headhunted to go back to the same company to basically do his job. Yeah, there's always something you can do in those situations. There's one here about, I did leave because I was very unhappy with the leadership management style of the 26-year-old boss. Yeah. And sometimes leaving is actually the right decision. Yeah. And I've done that before now. So I wouldn't criticize people for doing that. I've encountered a malicious manager. Yeah. And well done for landing a better job, and well done for leaving. That malicious, there are malicious people around. There aren't many of them, I don't think. But yeah, it may be that was a good idea to leave. Heidi. Oh, where's the question?
Just taking a step back, there's, let's see, Rochelle was mentioning about passive, malicious, and Wolfgang about communication. So one of the things that can happen, so I mentioned this in an email earlier this week about basically tantrums and a baby that ended up where my very, very smart friend put her baby to bed at first rub of the eyes, right, as opposed to waiting until baby was fully wailing. But it's the same thing with bosses, where some of them will, they don't exactly know what's going on, right? They don't want to be breathing down your neck, and so they try to stay out of your way. But what ends up happening is they're sitting there and they're getting worked up and frustrated and anxious and freaking out and don't know what's going on until they finally explode. And a lot of that is because basically they're worried about overstepping their boundaries. They're worried about hovering, etc. And a lot of that can be, if you check in, if you basically keep them up to date on what you're accomplishing, that can make a big difference. And it can basically kind of, okay, when it's just that stage of, gee, I wonder what Nancy is working on. All of a sudden it becomes, oh, this is what Nancy's working on. Okay, great. This is where that project is. Go ahead.
The reason that I came up with this strategy of keeping your boss really well informed is because years ago, my boss said to me that I always did achieve my objectives, but he had sleepless nights wondering how on earth I was going to do it, because he just couldn't understand the way I worked at all. And it just had never occurred to me that what I was doing wasn't obvious. Never in a million years. So when I started my next job, I actually asked my boss if I could sit down with him once a week and go through what I was doing. And I wrote him out a little report each week. And I did that for 6 or 7 weeks, like what was going on in my department, what the objectives were, where we were on everything, and what my plans were, where we were behind on anything. And after 6 weeks, he said, oh, we don't need these meetings, just give me the reports. And after another 6 weeks, he said, you know what you're doing, I don't need the reports anymore. And that just worked so much better than what I'd done before, that I've done that ever since, really. So that's how I kind of came up with that strategy, if anyone's wondering. And Wolfgang, you've put some things about, age discrimination. And I'm so sorry to hear that. I actually recruited a guy who was in his 60s to work for me when I think I was in my mid-20s. And everyone criticised me because they said, oh, he's too old and everything. He'd actually been made redundant. from another company. So we got him at half the salary because the job was only paying half what he was on. And I said to him, look, we can't pay any more than this, but if you want the job, it's yours. And he said that was fine because he just needed a few years, till he got his pension and stuff. And he was amazing. I learned so much from that guy. I left after 3 months because I hated working there so much. He was still there several years later because they thought he was so good. But I think, you need to be able to sell yourself more effectively to younger people. And there are ways of doing that. And I'm sorry that some younger people aren't really as appreciative of experience. But there are ways of explaining things to them. And part of it is you've got to understand things from their perspective and then explain it in a way that sort of makes sense to them, really. And it is possible. You can do it.
And I think it's great, Wolfgang, that you're able to find a better position and everything else. I just want to congratulate you on that and building a strong track record there. There's a question here from Tracy that said she was fired after 7 years of enabling the boss and kept trying to overproduce to please, but the boss just didn't like Tracy. And I mean, Tracy, I think it's great that you moved on and are establishing yourself in a new position. And for everyone here who's been in a situation where you have had a difficult boss and you've moved on, one of the things that you definitely want to do, if you're still in a difficult situation, rather, is to be documenting your successes and sharing them with your boss, so that even if it was not the best relationship, when you leave, you do want to get as positive a reference as you can from that person, right? This is somebody who can potentially damage your career in ways you wouldn't even expect, because this is a job that you had on your resume. And so even just ironing things out and leaving as strong a note of sort of accomplishment as you can make a huge difference. And hopefully, we can help you in your new positions to establish yourself as strongly as possible.
Tracy's comment there, she said she was fired after 7 years, and kept trying to overproduce and so on. I mean, one of the things that I've done in the past, when I had a boss who used to sort of look at his watch every time I was leaving, like implying that I was leaving early and stuff. And in the end, I challenged him on it. And I asked him if he judged me on, how he judged my performance. And he sort of looked a bit flustered. And I said, well, do you judge my performance? No, I asked him what the output was like since I joined compared to what it was before I joined, because I was the manufacturing director. And he said, well, actually, it's much higher than it's ever been. I said, okay. And what about the way we're back on schedule? And he said, well, actually, we've never been on schedule before. And I said, and what about the quality now compared to what it was before? And he was like, yeah, the quality is much higher now. Shouldn't you be going home? Because he realized he was just being ridiculous, just judging me by the time I left every day. Of course, what he didn't realize, which was the ace I had up my sleeve, was that I was in at 7 every morning. He didn't get in till 9.
Wow.
Of course, he didn't know that because he
wasn't there until 9.
But I never even had to say that to him, because by the time I'd finished, he was too embarrassed to say anything else.
I think that's a really useful tool, is to basically be pointing your boss in the right place, making sure that that the agenda is being set, that the objectives are being measured correctly. Because I could definitely see how you can get distracted by things that are kind of silly, like, you parked too close to me in the parking lot in terms of where you park the car or something. It's I wish you moved 6 inches over to the left. And so that frustrates me. And anyway, there's just very small, silly things that can get in the way of very fruitful relationships. And I appreciate that you've been able to acknowledge a lot of that. Okay. And Eric is sharing a comment that he went through a hostile business situation, and the new boss agenda was getting rid of higher salaried employees. So, Eric, if you were made redundant in that kind of situation, if you lost your job in that situation, this isn't a story that you have to be embarrassed about. I mean, in a job interview, you would basically say, our company was taken over, new management came in, and as a result, I was let go. And that's it. I mean, that's the end of story for a job interview. And in a new job, there's nothing, obviously, that you did wrong. So there shouldn't be anything that you should feel embarrassed about to hold you back. And as long as you're confident about establishing the relationship and putting things on the right footing, I think that can make a huge difference.
What Alan didn't mention when I introduced myself was that actually what I do most now is hiring, and we do a sort of hiring consultancy, and we often come across people who've been made redundant from previous jobs, and it never seems to bother employers.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And sometimes they don't even ask why they were made redundant.
Well, I think that's fantastic. One other thing, and I welcome any more comments that you have, but one other thing I just wanted to get back to was the comment that Michelle had about passive managers. And I just want to acknowledge that a lot of managers are passive. It used to be that the world of work included people who are basically in the management track for long periods of time. They're trained in management. They mentor people into management, and through kind of series of consolidation and cutting, they now have basically everybody is a technical expert. Even managers came in as technical experts, not as managers. They weren't trained per se in management skills. The people who could train them in management skills, their mentors, were potentially very similar to themselves, brought in as technical field specialists, not as managers. And so what that means is there's a whole generation of leaders who don't know what they're doing and don't even know what they don't know. And as a result, they basically can be passive. They can end up kind of throwing, holding back until they blow up. There are lots of things that happen as a result of the lack of good training by managers. And one of the things, at least for those of you who want to join the program, that we hope we can help you do, and if not just using the content that we've shared already today, is I strongly encourage you to train your managers in what they have to do. I
was just going to mention that. I mean, funnily enough, we're working on a job at the moment. We're hiring a management accountant, and the woman we're hiring for, I suspect, is actually quite a good manager. But she's actually said to me that she wants someone who will manage her well, which is really interesting. But I think everyone should work on managing their boss effectively. It's a really, really important skill, and it is one of the things that we talk about, isn't it, Alan?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there are a number of positions, where I've talked to people and a job that I've been in where knowing what the objectives were was occasionally I would get a big project and I'd understand what the big project was, but on a weekly, monthly basis, the big X that we are aiming for wasn't made clear to me, and I wasn't savvy enough to ask. And they may not have been savvy enough to share with me, to be honest, but actually through a series of conversations, you can basically help understand what that picture is and help them articulate it, because they may not have it fully fleshed out in their mind either and need your help to understand what it looks like.
It may be they think it's all so obvious, they just haven't bothered to mention it to you, or they think you already understand. That's so common. It really is. It's really important to make sure you get that stuff clear. Alan, there's a question from Robert that I think you probably need to answer. I'm preparing to interview for a job in a global company. I've been told that the job may require 16 hours per day. When I interview, what kinds of questions should I be asking about that during the interview?
So, I mean, for me personally, Robert, if it was 16 hours a day, 5 days a week, that would be unsustainable. That being said, it could be that it's a job where it's a global company, so you've got to be there when Japan opens and when New York opens or something like that. Be there for time for both of those. And it could be that the expectation is that you do this not every day, but a couple days a week or something like that. So I would definitely just really understand with your eyes wide open before you accept the job what the expectation is, because that's...
I'd ask what's actually happened in the last few weeks, not just, what do you expect it to be, but how often has that actually happened? And at least be clear about what you're prepared to do before you go in for that interview.
And Robert, something else I would encourage is that's obviously going to make or break the conversation, but I wouldn't let that be the first question out of your mouth. Right? I would definitely, if you go make it through the phone interview, if you make it through the entire interview process and then have some really meaningful conversations with the people there in your department and find out what that means. I mean, that could mean that they expect you to work, and I'm on the East Coast, but they expect you to work from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., but you can go home at 4 o'clock and be there with your family from 4 to 8, right? It could be something like that they require. It could be, so there, there could be some flexibility there that makes it more reasonable, but definitely go through the process. If you're excited about if you're not excited about the job for other reasons, obviously don't pursue the job. But if you are excited about the job for other reasons, go through the process with good faith, acknowledging that this could be something that could be a conflict, but with good faith that you're going to do the best you can to make this opportunity interesting. And then when it seems like they're more interested in you, that's when you ask the questions about what they're after.
I mean, I think Wolfgang's comment there about the how that might be a little harsh on your health is a really pertinent point. And if it's just 1 or 2 days, fine, and you're prepared to do it, but on a regular basis, it isn't really very good for your health. But on the other hand, if it's something you really, really want to do, I mean, I've done it. I didn't do it willingly. It just sort of happened. And it wasn't what I was expecting. I wouldn't be doing it again. But then I'm old.
David shared a comment that scheduling regular check-ins with my manager may help him in assisting me, which he's shown a willingness to do, which is great. I think, especially when you're trying to learn new things, one of the most frustrating things that can happen is you're trying to do something that takes you hours, and your boss could do it in about 2 minutes because they just know a shortcut that you didn't know about, like you were manually typing stuff up, and they're like, oh, there's this import application that we made. And so it can make a huge difference with small things like that, with big things like that.
I think Robert's also just made a point here that the number of hours doesn't speak to the efficiency of the corporation. I think that is a really good point. If that was Denmark, that would be seen as unbelievably inefficient. That just wouldn't be happening. And we've got another couple of...
Hey, Christine,
yes, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Comment to describe the daily work schedule.
Yeah, good idea.
I think that's brilliant. Absolutely. Let's see what else.
Yeah, Wolfgang said he decided not to do it and got a much more interesting position. Yes, funny enough, Wolfgang, I actually left one of my first jobs just before I had to go on the night shift because I just felt that was a bridge too far. Really, so I completely agree with you there.
And I think, David, about scheduling check-ins, if you are a manager as well, I strongly encourage you just to start arranging these with your team, and they can be informal as, hey, Alan, just wanted to catch up with you for a minute. Why don't you swing by? And the first time they might think that you're trying to fire them or whatever, but after they kind of get the gist that this is just informal check-ins, and obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I would just make it clear and just say, it's an informal check-in, and this is what we'll be doing. We'll just be going through what you need to achieve this week, where you've got to, what's still got to be done, and what your plan is. Then people aren't worried about it.
Let's see, Wolfgang shared another one that second most recent employer able to utilize my time efficiently is bigger bang for the buck regarding time. I definitely think one of the really big things about objectives is that it helps you keep your time sacred, right? I mean, if you can have the conversation with your boss to understand what results they care about, then you can stop wasting time on projects that don't matter. And so your day's more efficient, the value that you create is higher. So if we don't see any other questions, I do want to encourage you all to join us for more conversations like this. We'd love to help you overcome whatever obstacles you're facing, set your goals, help you achieve your goals throughout the rest of 2018, and be there for you every step of the way. If you have an interest in this program and you haven't signed up just yet, you can definitely sign up now. If you have a hesitation and you don't feel comfortable putting it in the chat, just send us a quick email. We're happy to take it there.
Is there a website people can go to sign up, Alan? I think I saw a question about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me pull that up real quick, and I can put
Perhaps
that.
you're going to send everyone an email afterwards with those details in. That might be the easiest thing.
I think that's probably the easiest thing to do, is to put it there, and I will put this in chat as well. But
and Robert's asked, can we get a transcript of the chat string?
Oh, that's a good question, Robert. Robert, just send an email to us at info@interviewsuccessformula.com because there were a couple of good comments, I think, related to what you're up to, which would be helpful. And we can, I think, make that happen for you. No promises, but I think we can make that happen. And we will try to make this recording available for about 24 hours or 48 hours.
Tracy's got a question, which I think we should just answer before we go. Hello, I've attempted to check in with my manager, but he's not interested. How do I progress? It depends what you mean by not interested and how you've approached him, Tracy. Sorry, is it? Yeah, I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I hope so. I probably, maybe because I'm English, I wouldn't say, can I check in with you? I might just go up and say, look, this is what I'm trying to achieve this week. Can I just check those are your priorities? And just approach them in the corridor or something, even if you can't get an actual scheduled meeting. Just do something really, really quick like that. Or just give it to them on a piece of paper and say, you know, this is what I'm working on this week. I just want to check that those are your priorities. Or, you know, here are the things I've got to do. What are the priorities out of these? Just start off with something really small and short like that, and then keep doing it on a regular basis and try to build it up a bit. But just be really clear about what you want to achieve by having that meeting. And quite often that could be done in just a short space of time. And once he sees that a little chat with you is useful, he has resisted. And I've tried several chats informally and in a written format. I think we'd need to spend a bit more time and go into this in a bit more depth, Tracy, but I suspect there is something that could be done. But yeah, we'd need a bit more background on that one. Perhaps that's our first topic for our next webinar. It's a good one.
Sometimes they're knotted situations that are hard to unwrap. Yeah. So Melody, it's hard to make a written form of everything. So we will make the replay available for a little while. Apologies for that, not having like a transcript of it or something like that. But that being said, there actually is inside the members area of the Job Success Forum that everything we've talked about is kind of covered in pretty intensive detail. Christine is nailing it today. She said you might ask for a five-minute meeting to review questions and verify your priorities. I think that sounds pretty good. If you can make the asks seem pretty small, it can seem awkward as to why not. And if they, you know, you can always ask Tracy, if you ask the question that Tracy suggested, is there anything in particular that's, you know, holding you back from having that conversation? Or you just ask what's going on. That can help. But Christine, I think that's a great way to ask, just for 5 minutes or a few questions, verify priorities. Well, in any event, I just want to thank you all for spending this time with us, for your engagement, your comments, your questions. All of you in the job search, I want to wish you the best of luck in landing a new job. I hope you have a great manager. All of you starting new jobs, I want to wish you the best of luck and congratulate you on making that transition. And I hope we can support many of you over the course of the year with the challenges that you're facing. So, thanks so much, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
And make you really successful. That's our goal.
All right. Well, have a great President's Day weekend. I hope you had a nice Valentine's Day and everything else. And bye for now.
Hope to see you soon. Bye.